The lost city of Heracleion, Egypt's sunken metropolis. Close your eyes now. Let the weight of the day slip away. Let your body grow heavy against the bed or the chair, each breath sinking you deeper into stillness. You are safe here, you are warm, and as you listen, let my voice be the slow tide that carries you towards sleep. Before we begin, tell me, where are you listening from tonight? Is it a small room lit only by a lamp, or somewhere beneath a blanket of stars? I would like to imagine you there, hearing these words as the world outside grows quiet. You drift now in your mind to a place where the air is cool and damp, and the world around you hums with a silence that is not empty, but full. You feel it in the ground beneath your feet, in the slow pull of the tide nearby, in the gentle sway of something unseen. The darkness is not frightening. It is soft, like velvet pressed against your skin. You breathe, and the air tastes faintly of salt and stone, as though the sea is near, waiting patiently. The surface of the water before you is glass. It holds the reflection of a moon so pale and perfect that you cannot tell where the light ends and the night begins. You kneel by the edge, fingers grazing the surface. The ripples stretch outward, whispering secrets in a language you cannot yet understand. In the stillness, something moves beneath the surface, a shadow, long and slow, tracing the outlines of shapes too perfect to be natural. Pillars, arches, a road that seems to lead into the heart of the sea itself. You lean closer, and the water shows you more. Massive statues lie tilted in the silt, their stone eyes clouded but still watching. The tips of columns rise from the sand like the bones of something ancient and noble. It feels like the remains of a dream, one the world had almost forgotten, yet you have stumbled upon it in this quiet night. Even now, the stones hum in the silence of the night. It is not a sound you hear with your ears, but one that travels through the bones of your body, steady and deep, as though the city itself still breathes beneath the waves. Somewhere in that darkness you sense a memory waiting, a story pressed into the stones, waiting for someone to listen, waiting for you. You do not rush. You stay at the edge, letting the rhythm of the water match the rhythm of your breathing, in and out. The air is cool on your skin, and each breath makes you feel lighter, as though your body could float here forever. These shadows beneath the water drift and settle, and for a moment you think you see a street wide, paved, lined with doorways that once opened to lives long gone. No footsteps sound here now, no voices call out over the harbour. But the silence is not emptiness. It is the kind of silence that comes after a song, when the last note hangs in the air and no one dares to speak. You feel that stillness wrap around you like a blanket. Somewhere, far away, a bird cries out, its voice lonely and beautiful. The sound fades, quickly, as though swallowed by the sea. There is a question in the air now, soft but insistent. You can feel it tugging at your thoughts, like a thread woven through the fabric of the night. Why was it erased from history? This place, these stones once meant something to the world. Ships must have sailed from this harbour. Merchants must have walked these streets. Priests must have spoken blessings here. And yet, for so long, no one remembered. No one came. The water stirs and the image beneath it wavers, as if the city itself shifts in its sleep. The shadow of a great temple looms there, its entrance lost in darkness. You cannot see inside, but you feel it calling. There are words carved deep into its walls, names that once carried power, but they are too far away for you to read. It is as if the city is testing you, asking if you're ready to hear its story. You stay a little longer at the water's edge. The moon's light bends and dances on the ripples, turning each wave into a ribbon of silver. Somewhere in your chest you feel the weight of time, centuries pressed into moments, the past folding over the present. You do not know if the city beneath the water is sleeping, or if it is you who is dreaming it. Your eyelids grow heavier, but your mind is clear. You can almost imagine stepping forward, your feet breaking the surface of the water without a splash, your body sinking into the quiet below. The water is not cold. It is warm, like air on a summer evening, wrapping around you in a slow embrace. The deeper you go, the more the world above fades, until there is nothing left but the sound of your own heart and the endless, drifting dark. In the shadows you see the face of a statue, its lips curved in the faintest smile. It feels like recognition, as though it has been waiting for you to arrive. Around it, the streets stretch away into the unknown, corners disappearing into the gloom, doorways half buried in sand. The walls are carved with symbols you do not yet understand, but their shapes are soothing, like the rhythm of waves. You drift among them, not walking but floating, as though the water has taken your weight away. The city is quiet, but it is not dead. In the far distance, you think you hear a soft echo, like a voice carried on the tide. You cannot tell what it says. Perhaps it is not meant to be understood yet. The current guides you through an archway, and beyond it you find a courtyard. The moonlight filters down here in narrow beams, lighting the dust that hangs in the water like tiny stars. In the centre of the courtyard lies a stone altar, cracked but still standing. You reach out to touch it, your fingertips brushing against the cool surface. For a heartbeat, you feel the vibration again, the deep, slow hum of the city's memory. You let your hand rest there, and for a moment the centuries fall away. You see the courtyard alive with colour, priests in flowing robes, offerings of flowers and gold, the air heavy with incense. Laughter echoes from somewhere nearby, mingling with the creak of ship masts and the cry of gulls. The sea sparkles just beyond the walls, and the whole city seems to breathe as one, and then it fades. The vision dissolves into shadow, and you're once again alone in the quiet courtyard beneath the waves. But the hum remains. The city still remembers. Somewhere in this vast, drowned place lies the answer to the question that lingers in your mind. Not yet, but soon. For now, you drift in the gentle current, your body weightless, your thoughts slow. The stones around you stand in their silence, holding their secrets close, and as you close your eyes, letting the water cradle you, you feel the story beginning to open, one ripple at a time. Breathe in, slow and easy, and let the last small knots in your shoulders loosen. The water holds you as gently as sleep holds a dream. You are here, in this soft, shrouded night, where the stone, the shadow, the silence speak more clearly than any voice above the waves. You let your mind quiet, and in that quiet the question rises again like a silver fish turning under the moon. Why was this place erased from history? It is a simple question, but it opens like a doorway, and behind it waits a long corridor of echoes. You're not afraid to walk there. You drift, and the corridor drifts with you. The city below does not rush to answer. Answers seldom do. They hide in seams and fractures, in the places where light and dark touch and trade secrets. You watch a trail of pale sand lift and fall in the current, and it feels like a veil being raised, then lowered, the world offering a glimpse and then keeping its deeper rooms for later. Perhaps that is kindness. Perhaps the mind needs gentleness when it meets the ancient. You pass a toppled column, its fluted sides carved with faint lines that your fingers read more than your eyes. The grooves are smooth from the long caress of the sea. A small fish slips in and out of the shallow channels as if reading a script older than maps. You float near the broken capital and feel the slow thrum of the city beneath your ribs. The thrum is patient. It has waited for more nights than you can count. It will wait through this one too, and the next. You listen anyway. Listening is its own kind of torch. The question returns, softer, more insistent. Why would a city of harbours and shrines and markets fall through the memory of the world like a stone through water, leaving only ripples that fade into glass? You think of names that were once spoken here, names that opened doors and steadied ships and blessed journeys. You think of those names carried away like smoke in a wind that never stops. The wind over stone, the echo of footsteps, the hush after voices. The stone, the shadow, the silence. The motifs circle like slow birds, patient and sure. A lane appears ahead, slanting toward a darkness that is not empty but full of waiting. It is paved with large blocks that catch the moonlight. In pale scales, you lower until your toes almost brush the surface, as if you are about to step into a story that remembers how to carry you. The lane is lined with thresholds, plain rectangles, some half buried, some open like mouths. You sense rooms beyond them, rooms of oil lamps and woven mats and clay jars cool to the touch. You know you are imagining, and yet the imagining feels guided, as if the city is lending you its memory to colour in the outlines. You pause and look back. The water behind you is a long, luminous hallway, where each breath sets a small galaxy of silt spinning. You realise how quiet you've become inside. Your heartbeat is a polite knock on a distant door. Your thoughts, once busy and bright, now move like lanterns in a mist, slower, kinder, each one casting a circle of light just big enough for the next step. In that calm, you let yourself remember that all cities are stories told in stone. They rise from the need for shelter, the need for trade, the need for worship, the need for each other. They are built by hands, guided by hope, and watched over by the sky. And sometimes the sky looks away, and the ground makes other plans. Even this thought arrives without fear. The sea keeps its voice low. The past keeps its edges rounded by time. You pass beneath an arch where a string of shells has tangled and turned to a white, delicate fringe. A narrow courtyard opens, cupping the moonlight like water in a palm. In its centre stands a square base, empty now, where something once stood that drew eyes upward. You circle it slowly. You notice that the stones around it are arranged with intention lines that point, lines that echo, lines that repeat like a soft chant. Your body recognizes the comfort of pattern. The mind rests more easily where there is order, even if the meaning sleeps. You kneel, and your fingers sink into fine sand that could be ground shell, ground time, ground prayers. The sand slips away and reveals a small carved mark along the base's edge, a shallow groove, a single sign. You do not know its name, but you feel the care that placed it here. Someone once leaned close to cut it. Someone once stood back to see if it was true. That closeness crosses the distance between your breath and theirs. It does not matter that centuries flow between you like a broad river. For a moment the river is narrow, and two hands rest on the same stone. The question glows again. Why was it erased? Your first thought is that perhaps nothing is ever truly erased. Perhaps it is only covered, like this mark under the sand, like the city under the sea, like the memory under sleep. Hidden, not forbidden, veiled, not lost, drifting just beneath the surface, waiting for light to angle in and find it. You hold that thought gently. It is a kind one, and kindness is the right tool for this hour. You rise and move on, following the faint slope of the lane as it turns toward what might have been a waterfront. The water grows brighter ahead as, if the seabed lifts and the moonlight thickens, you imagine the old harbour in daytime, the clatter of ropes and the wet gleam of oars, the smell of tar and dates and smoke. You imagine a child running along the edge with a reed toy, feet slapping stone. The picture arrives fully formed, then recedes like a tide, leaving only a wet sheen in the mind, and with it a small ache that is not pain, only the language of distance. A shape emerges on your right, a colossal foot, still attached to the lower part of a statue that must have once towered over this place. Its toes are like smooth, pale hills. A curve of sandal strap crosses the top, carved so carefully that you feel the maker's breath in the line. You drift near, floating beside a thing meant to make people lift their eyes and feel small in a way that comforts. There is humility in the scale, and also care. Someone gave this stone a life large enough to shelter the thoughts of many. You rest in its shadow, and the shadow rests on you like shade on a hot noon, even though the water is cool. You do not rush the answer. If an answer is needed, it will come in its own time. For now you let other possibilities arrive. Perhaps a great trembling once moved through this land, the ground changing its mind, the mud turning to liquid, and then to stillness again, swallowing what stood upon it. Perhaps the river shifted, and the sea rose, and the maps were redrawn by hands that never knew this place, and the new names did not include it. Perhaps the city itself chose to grow quiet, its work completed, its story turned inward. You are allowed to wonder without deciding. Wonder is wide enough to hold many maybes. You reach the edge where stone gives way to a field of low, rippled sand. There is a sensation here, like standing in a doorway between rooms. Behind you the lanes and courtyards, before you the open plain where the harbour once beat with many hearts. It feels like a breath held and then released. You listen. From far off, thin as thread, comes a sound like a bell struck under a blanket. It could be a memory of a bell, not the thing itself. It could be the city speaking in the only voice it can still use. You answer by being quiet. The moon leans lower, the light softens, the water seems to thicken with sleep, and you find your eyelids lowering in sympathy. You remind your body, relax, rest, drift. This is a safe place for dreams to unfold. The story is patient. The sea is patient. You are allowed to be too. If you are listening from a small apartment in a busy city, or a farmhouse where crickets write their steady lines, or a dorm room lit by a single screen, or a quiet corner that smells faintly of books, wherever you are part of this stillness now. This city recognizes the listening, and that is enough for tonight. Before you turn back, you look once more across the open plain. In the near distance, half tilted in the sand, lies a stone ring. Perhaps the mouth of a well, perhaps the base of a column, perhaps only a circle made by chance. The circle pleases you. It suggests that endings are also beginnings, that what sinks can rise in another form, that what falls silent can return as an echo that guides instead of shouts. You keep that circle with you as you float away, a simple shape to cradle as sleep draws closer. The stone, the shadow, the silence. Wind over stone, echo of footsteps, the hush that follows. The words repeat like waves tracing the shore. They do not demand anything. They keep you company. And somewhere just ahead, in rooms the city has not opened yet, the first true answers are waiting, unhurried as dawn. For now, the question is a light you can carry without effort, a small steady flame cupped in the hands of the night. The current guides you like a slow hand on your back, and you let it. Your limbs grow heavier in the best way, the way that tells you the body is ready to rest while the mind wanders further into the deep. Somewhere in the water around you, the city is turning over in its sleep. The shapes shift in the distance, as if they too are breathing walls that fade into pillars, pillars that dissolve into archways, archways into shadow. Every turn feels like another page in a book you didn't know you'd been reading all your life. You float along the remains of a wide avenue. The stones beneath you are uneven, some tilted, some swallowed by sand. Yet you can see their deliberate pattern, the rhythm set by the hands that placed them. You imagine those hands, steady, calloused, knowing the weight of each block before it met the earth. The water drapes itself over these old roads like a silk veil, blurring edges, softening what was once sharp. And in this softened place the years dissolve. The air you breathe in your mind smells faintly of spice and resin. The sky above is not a ceiling of waves, but a dome of pale morning light, 1,000 years ago. Figures move in this vision, not in a rush, not with noise, but in the steady pace of daily life. A woman carries a woven basket, the shadows of its reeds falling over her arm. A boy runs between stalls, his bare feet tapping the stones in a rhythm only children know. A man pauses to tighten the ropes at the mast of a moored boat, its hull painted with faded patterns. They pass through you as if you're made of mist, because here in this layered dream you are. You're only a listener, and the city allows you to be nothing more. The hum is with you still, that deep vibration that does not belong to the sea alone. It threads through the bones of the city, binding one stone to another, one memory to the next. It is not a song in any language you know, but it is music nonetheless, patient and unbroken. It follows you as you drift toward a structure that looms from the haze, a temple, massive even in ruin. The columns are wide enough that it would take several people holding hands to encircle one. Their tops vanish into the dark as though the temple has no roof, only the open water above. You approach the entrance, a tall doorway framed with carvings so worn they seem to move when the light touches them. Lines curl into shapes that might be waves, or might be snakes, or might be something entirely forgotten. At the base of the doorway, a thin crack runs from one side to the other, filled with silt. You pause before crossing it, as though this small threshold deserves respect. And then, as your body floats through, the light changes. Inside, the water seems thicker, the shadows deeper. You hear no sound but your own breath and the slow pulse of your heart. In the dimness, enormous statues stand against the walls, figures of gods whose names you feel rather than remember. Their eyes are wide and still, their lips pressed into the barest hint of a smile. One holds a staff, the top carved into a shape you cannot place, though it stirs something ancient in you. Another extends a hand as if in offering, the stone fingers worn smooth. You move deeper into the hall, and the space opens suddenly into a chamber. The floor is littered with fragments, broken jars, shards of tablets, the curved tail of a stone carving that might have been a lion or a fish. The walls are lined with shallow recesses, each one holding an object, small bowls, coils of metal, fragments of worked wood. They are not arranged for display. They feel as if they were left in haste or in devotion. Here, in the heart of the temple, you feel the city's pulse most strongly. It is not loud, it is not urgent, but it is certain. And as you let the hum move through you, a thought comes. This was not just a port. This was a place of vows. Trade may have fed the city's body, but worship fed its soul. In these rooms, people stood in candlelight, speaking words they hoped the gods would hear. The air must have been thick with smoke and whispers, the ground warm from the press of many feet. You reach out to one of the recesses, brushing your fingers over a small disc of stone. Its surface is carved with a circle surrounded by radiating lines. A sun, perhaps, or an eye. You hold it for a moment in the quiet, and the question you carry shifts in tone. It is no longer just, why was it erased? But why was it chosen? Cities do not always vanish without reason. Sometimes they are taken. Sometimes they are kept. The water sways you gently as you replace the disc. In the corner of the chamber, something glints faintly, metal, dulled but still catching the light. You swim closer and find a narrow band of gold bent into an imperfect loop. It could have been part of a crown or a bracelet or a piece of a larger ornament. Its surface is etched with lines so fine they are almost invisible. You cannot tell if they were decoration or language. Either way, the work is too careful to have been ordinary. This was made for someone or something important. You imagine the moment it fell, a tremor in the earth, a cry of alarm, water rushing where it did not belong, the gold slipping from a wrist or altar, turning once in the air before sinking into darkness. That moment has stretched across centuries, waiting here for you to witness it. You hold the image gently and let it dissolve. The chamber narrows into a corridor that slopes downward. You follow it, and the hum in the stones grows quieter, as if urging you to tread softly. The floor here is coated in a fine, dark silt that swirls around your feet like smoke. The walls are close enough to touch both at once, their surfaces rough with carvings you can only partly make out. Some are lines and circles, others are shapes that resemble birds or fish. All of them feel deliberate. The corridor ends in another doorway, smaller than the first. Beyond it lies an open expanse, not a room but a kind of courtyard. The moonlight filters down through a break in the ruins above, scattering in thin shafts that turn the drifting silt into clouds of gold. In the center stands a single, massive slab, its surface flat and unmarked. You know without touching it that this stone has stood here since before the temple was built around it. Perhaps it was the reason the temple was built at all. You circle it slowly. Its edges are sharp, unsoftened by time, as though the stone itself resists decay. You wonder how many hands have rested here, how many vows have been made with palms pressed flat against this surface. You wonder what it would mean to add yours. When you finally lay your hand upon it, the hum changes. It deepens, resonating in your chest, your throat, your skull. For a moment you're standing on dry land, the air heavy with heat and the smell of the sea. Voices murmur nearby, chanting in low tones. The light is brighter, but it does not come from the sky. It seems to rise from the stone itself, a pale glow that reaches upward until it touches the faces of the statues and makes their eyes shine. And then it is gone. You're once again in the quiet courtyard, the water moving gently around you. But you know the city has shown you something, just a fragment, just enough to keep you close. The question remains, but it feels less like a demand and more like an invitation now. The city is not ready to tell you everything. It will open its doors in its own time. You feel no frustration in that, only the deep patience that the sea teaches. You let yourself drift back through the corridor, past the chamber, past the towering gods, until you're once again outside the temple, the open water stretching ahead like a road. The moon has shifted. The shadows are longer. Somewhere far below, the hum continues steady as a heartbeat, and you, floating in the soft dark, know that the story is only beginning. The water feels warmer here, as if you've drifted into a sheltered place where the sea keeps its own quiet hearth. You let your body go slack, trusting the gentle current to carry you forward. Each breath slows a little more, each blink lingers, and you begin to sense that you are moving not only through space, but also through time, downward and backward, like a leaf spiraling into a deep pool. The ruins ahead shift and stretch, outlines hardening into clarity, then softening again, as though the city is deciding how much to show you. The avenue before you widens, the broken edges giving way to smoother stone. You can almost feel the firmness beneath your feet now, as if the silt has peeled away in your mind to reveal what once was. The walls on either side are higher here, some still standing in jagged lines, others reduced to knee-high fragments. Between them, shadows rest like sleeping animals, untroubled by your presence. You let your gaze wander. Every surface holds the trace of human touch, chisels that carved, hands that polished, feet that wore the edges smooth. You feel the presence of these long-vanished people not as ghosts, but as warmth, like the lingering heat on a stone wall at dusk. They are gone, yet their lives hum quietly in the bones of the city. And then, in the quiet, the official story begins to take shape in your mind. You do not know where it comes from, whether from memory, from the city itself, or from the slow gathering of things you've heard before, but it unfolds as steadily as a tide coming in. It tells you that this was once Heracleion, the great gateway to Egypt, a city of harbours and temples where the Nile met the sea. Founded according to the chronicles around the 8th century before the Common Era, though its name, Thonis, had been whispered in Egyptian prayers for centuries before that. It stood as a place where ships from every corner of the Mediterranean came to trade, grain for cedar, gold for wine, papyrus for glass. The air would have been thick with many languages, the markets bright with dyes and spices, the harbours crowded with sails. The official history speaks in calm tones. It tells of the city's devotion to the god Amun-Gereb, of the great temple that rose at the water's edge, where priests performed rituals to bless Egypt's rulers. It speaks of processions and offerings, of statues carried through streets lined with palm leaves, of music rising over the water on festival days. This was a city not only of commerce, but of ceremony. You drift slowly, watching the vision overlay itself on the ruins. Where you see broken columns now, the story paints them whole, crowned with carvings of lotus and papyrus. Where the streets lie empty, it fills them with people in linen robes, with merchants calling their prices, with children weaving between them like darting fish. You hear the soft slap of water against boat hulls, the creak of wooden masts, the low murmur of voices. But history also speaks of the end. It doesn't linger on it. It states it plainly, almost gently, as though it were a matter of course. The city, it says, was swallowed by disaster. Perhaps an earthquake shook the delta's loose soil until it turned to liquid beneath the buildings. Perhaps the sea rose, creeping higher each year until it claimed the harbour and the streets and the temples. By the 2nd century before the Common Era, Heracleion had vanished beneath the water, its role taken by Alexandria just to the west. The official account is calm, almost soothing in its certainty. It places the story neatly on a timeline, giving the city a beginning, a flourishing, and an end. But as you listen, floating there in the soft dark, you feel the same quiet tug you have felt since first seeing the shadows beneath the water. It is the sense that this story, true though it may be, is not the whole story. You let yourself sink a little lower, brushing your fingers along the edge of a wall. The stone is cool, but the sensation it gives you is not of finality. Instead, it feels like something paused, something waiting. You think of how the sea holds things, not erases them, but keeps them in its slow, shifting archive. The city has not been destroyed, it has been kept. You pass an open space that must once have been public square. The floor is a patchwork of large, flat stones, some cracked, some missing, the gaps filled with sand. At the centre lies a massive block with a shallow hollow carved into it, perhaps once a basin for water or offerings. You imagine it shining in the sun, reflecting the blue of the sky, the gold of coins, the red of flowers dropped in honour of some god. Around the square, doorways open into what were once shops or storerooms. You peer inside one, your light catching on the outlines of amphorae half buried in silt. Their necks are slender, their bodies rounded and wide. You picture them filled with oil or wine, sealed with wax, stamped with the marks of distant makers. You picture the hands that lifted them, the voices that called out their contents, the coins that changed hands in exchange. The vision fades, and you are left with the stillness again. The hum returns, steady and patient. You know that the official record is not wrong, but you also know that something else lies beneath it, as surely as the city lies beneath the sea. The current tugs at you gently, urging you onward. You pass another row of columns, their tops broken, their bases thick with coral. Fish weave in and out of the spaces between them, bright flashes of colour against the muted stone. You think of how life has continued here, reshaping the city in its own image. What was once a place for people is now a garden for the sea, and yet the human marks remain, layered beneath the living coral and drifting weeds. Ahead, the avenue narrows into a channel between two long walls. At the far end, you glimpse what looks like a gateway, tall, rectangular, its lintel still intact. You move toward it slowly, savouring the steady motion, the way the water parts around you. Passing through, you feel a change in the current, as though you have entered another chamber of the city's memory. Here, the ruins are less disturbed. The walls stand higher, the carvings sharper. You can almost believe you have stepped back to a time when the city still breathed. In your mind's eye, you see banners hanging from the walls, their colours bright against the pale stone. You hear the soft murmur of a crowd gathered for some announcement, some ceremony. The vision holds for a moment, then drifts away, leaving you with the quiet and the shadows once more. You're aware of the official story lingering in your thoughts, but it feels like a surface calm, polished, concealing the depths below. Somewhere in those depths is the truth the city has kept for itself. You pause, letting the water cradle you. The moonlight above has shifted again, spilling through the broken stones in new patterns. You follow one pale beam as it falls across the wall beside you, catching on a set of faint weathered symbols. You cannot read them, but you feel certain they are a name the city once remembered. You trace the lines with your fingertips, and the hum in the stones deepens, a low, steady chord that seems to say, "Stay, listen, there is more, and you will." But not all at once. This is a story that unfolds in the rhythm of tides, and you are willing to drift with it. Somewhere ahead, beyond the reach of the official record, the city will begin to tell you the parts that no one wrote down, the parts that slipped quietly from memory, but not from the stones. The moon above is only a faint shimmer now, broken by the restless surface far overhead. You float deeper along the avenue, past the gateway whose lintel still holds the weight of centuries, and the water grows cooler. Your breath is slow, your mind quieter still, as though each ruined stone you pass takes one more layer of noise from you. It feels almost as if the city has drawn you far enough in that it can begin to speak in its own voice. You drift through the gateway into a space that feels vast, even in ruin. Columns rise in slow lines on either side, their tops fractured, their bases sunken into the silt. The floor beneath you is uneven, some stones lifted as though by invisible hands, others sunken, cracked. Ahead, the open space narrows toward what looks like the entrance to another temple or civic hall. The outlines are still strong despite the years, a testament to the care with which they were made. The official story lingers at the edges of your thoughts. Earthquake, liquefaction, flood. You can almost hear the calm voices of scholars explaining how the loose, waterlogged soil of the Nile Delta gave way, how the city simply slid beneath the sea. But here, surrounded by the steady, patient hum of the stones, you feel the need to ask the question again, the way you might ask it of someone whose answer you didn't quite believe the first time. Why? The water is still, heavy with the weight of that question. Your gaze falls on the walls to your left. The carvings here are more distinct than most patterns of waves and spirals, broken by shapes that seem almost like maps. You trace them slowly, your fingertips, brushing away the thin film of silt. One spiral in particular draws you in. Its lines curve inward, then outward again, like the paths of tides. You wonder if it was meant as decoration, or if it recorded some long-forgotten observation about the water's rhythms. And then, without warning, your mind fills the ruins with life. The columns straighten, their broken tops restored. The floor evens under your feet. The water around you becomes air, heavy with heat and the mingled scents of incense and salt. You stand at the edge of a gathering. People move past you in linen and gold, carrying bowls and offerings toward the hall ahead. There is a tension in the air, not fear but anticipation, as though something important is about to be spoken. You follow the crowd into the hall. It is vast, the ceiling painted with deep blues and golds, the walls lined with statues that seem to watch with calm approval. At the far end stands a dais, and on it, a man in a long robe marked with symbols you do not know. His voice is low, but it carries, and the people lean forward to hear. His words are not in any language you understand, yet their rhythm feels familiar, like the rolling in and out of waves. He speaks, and you feel the crowd holding its breath. There is talk of the sea, of the land, of the thin line that holds them apart. There is mention of the gods who keep that balance, and a plea for their continued favour. And then the vision trembles, as if a sudden wind has swept through the hall. You blink, and the air has turned back to water, the gold and blue above replaced by fractured stone and drifting silt. The crowd is gone, only the hum remains. You hover there, letting the silence sink in. The official record would say nothing of this, that the city's fall was only geology and time. Yet in that fleeting vision, you felt a different kind of weight. The weight of a warning, perhaps, or of a knowing that something was coming. You begin to wonder if the city's end was not simply an accident of nature, but something it had been preparing for, even expecting. You move toward the far end of the hall. Here at the base of the dais lies a slab of stone engraved with more symbols, lines, circles, curves. They are too worn to read fully, but your eyes catch on one detail. A small, deliberate break in the carving. A space where nothing is inscribed. It feels intentional, like a silence in the middle of a sentence. The current tugs at you again, leading you out of the hall and into a narrower passage. The walls close in, and you feel the waters touch more distinctly here. Your hand brushes something smooth pottery, intact but half buried in the silt. You free it gently, brushing away the sand to reveal a jar no longer than your forearm. Its surface is painted with alternating bands of blue and white, still faintly visible after all these years. As you hold it, an image comes to you, not of the jar in use, but of it being set down in this very passage. A woman's hands, careful and steady, place it against the wall. She looks round once, then turns away, her steps quick. You cannot see her face, but you feel her urgency. She left the jar here not as storage, but as an offering, or perhaps as a message for someone who would come later. Someone like you. You set the jar back exactly where you found it and continue. The passage opens into a smaller chamber, its floor covered in a fine layer of shell and coral. At its centre, a single column rises, unbroken from base to top. Around it, the remains of benches or low platforms suggest that this was a place where people gathered, though not for trade or worship. This space feels private, purposeful. Your mind fills it again. A circle of figures seated in the half-light, speaking in low voices. They're not priests, not merchants, but something else, keepers, perhaps, or watchers. They exchange small objects, unroll and study sheets of papyrus. There is a map on the floor between them, drawn in fine lines, showing not only the city but the currents of the sea, the depth of the channels and markings far beyond the harbour. The vision fades, and you're left with the column, the shell-covered floor, the water's slow sway. You think of how the official record contains none of this, no mention of secret gatherings or maps that reached past the known world. And yet, here it is, pressed into the stone like a memory the city cannot help but share. You leave the chamber and find yourself back in open water. The current here is stronger, pulling you toward the faint glimmer of moonlight filtering through a break in the ruins above. You rise slowly, letting the light grow around you until the shapes of the city begin to fade into shadow below. From this height you can see more of Heracleion's sprawl, the pattern of streets, the scatter of temples and markets, the outline of the old harbour. Even in ruin, it is clear that this was no small port but a city of great complexity and intention. The hum reaches you still, though softer now, as if speaking from a greater distance. You float there, suspended between sea and sky, between the neat lines of the official story and the untidy depths of what you've begun to glimpse. Somewhere in those depths lies the reason the city vanished, and why it stayed hidden for so long. And you have the sense that the answers, when they come, will not be simple, and will not belong entirely to history. The water rocks you gently, and you close your eyes, letting the images linger, the spiral carving, the silent break in the stone's inscription, the circle of figures around the map. The city has shown you pieces. The rest waits, deep and patient, in the shadows, where the stone, the shadow, and the silence meet. The sea feels heavier tonight, not in a way that threatens, but in the way a quilt settles over your body when you lie down, a slow, enveloping weight that tells you it's time to listen more closely. You let yourself sink back beneath the shimmering surface, back into the corridors of stone and shadow where the lost city breathes. Each kick of your feet is unhurried, the current almost carrying you, as though the water itself remembers the path better than you do. The ruins rise around you again. Walls lean inward, their jagged tops tracing broken lines against the dim light above. Coral has claimed the cracks, swaying gently in a tide that has no voice here. In this part of the city, the streets are narrower, and the silt lies thicker on the ground, muffling every motion. It feels like a quieter quarter residential, perhaps a place where the rhythms of daily life once unfolded behind closed doors. You pass a low archway, half filled with sand, and duck inside. The room beyond is small, its roof collapsed, leaving only open beams. You imagine it once covered in reeds or timber, the air smelling faintly of cooking smoke. There is a platform along one wall, perhaps where bedding was laid, and in the corner the broken rim of a clay jar still rests where it fell. It is nothing remarkable, yet it hums with the same deep presence as the grand temple you visited before. You realize that the city's silence is not uniform. It changes from place to place. Here, it is intimate, as though every stone has stored the voices of those who once lived in these rooms. Mothers speaking softly to children, the clink of bowls set down at mealtimes, the gentle argument of neighbors. In your mind, these sounds surface faintly, layered beneath the hush of the water. They are not loud enough to disturb you, only enough to remind you that this city was not just a stage for kings and gods. It was also a home. Leaving the house, you follow a winding alley that leads toward the faint outline of what may have been a courtyard. As you enter, the space widens. The floor is uneven, scattered with small stones and fragments of pottery. At the center lies a shallow basin, its edges still smooth. You imagine it once held water from the Nile, brought in clay jars at dawn, reflecting the first light of morning. In that reflection, you sense people might have found a kind of quiet magic. Not the magic of grand rituals, but of small daily acts, washing the dust from one's face, filling a pitcher for cooking, cooling a fevered brow. It strikes you how these moments, so easily forgotten, form the heartbeat of a place. Without them, the city's larger story would have nothing to stand on. As you explore further, the walls begin to change. The stones here are larger, more finely fitted, as though this part of the city belonged to those of greater means. You pass the remains of a carved doorway, the lintel still bearing faint traces of painted lotus flowers. The air, if it can be called that, Here, beneath the water feels lighter, more open. You swim through into a wide hall, its columns arranged in neat rows. It is here that the vision rises again, unbidden. The water fades into warm air, the silt becomes swept stone, and sunlight floods the hall. Cushioned benches line the walls and people recline, talking in low, deliberate tones. A man in a long, pale robe stands at the centre, holding a rolled piece of papyrus. His words are met with nods, with thoughtful glances exchanged between the listeners. You understand none of what is said, but the tone is unmistakable. This is a discussion of consequence. The vision wavers, and you're back in the quiet, empty hall. But its presence lingers, and you feel as though you've stepped into a place where decisions were made, not in the loud, public way of the marketplace, but in the careful, measured way of those who weigh futures before they arrive. The official record would not note this. It would chart the city's trade routes, its religious festivals, its political ties. It would mark the year it sank. But here, in these silent halls, you feel that there were other layers, private councils perhaps, where news of changes in the sea, the river, or the land were shared before they became common knowledge. You swim on. The hall leads to another street, this one opening onto a larger square. In the centre stand a massive plinth, empty now, though its surface is worn smooth from centuries of contact. You imagine the statue that once stood there, a ruler perhaps, or a god whose gaze looked out toward the harbour. Around the edges of the square you find small shops, their entrances still framed by stone thresholds. One shop draws you in. It is shallow, with a low counter of stone. On its floor, half buried in sand, lies a scattering of small beads, some of glass, some of a green stone you cannot name. They catch the dim light and gleam faintly. You scoop a few into your palm, turning them in the water. They are cool and perfect, still holding the colour they had when they were strung into necklaces or sewn into fine cloth. And with them comes another glimpse, a woman leaning over the counter, her hands quick as she threads the beads onto a length of cord. Outside, the murmur of the market hums softly. She glances up at a customer, smiling, the beads catching the light as she lifts them for inspection. It is a simple exchange, but it carries the same weight as any ceremony, an offering of beauty, of craft, of the human desire to create and share. The vision fades, and you return the beads to their resting place in the sand. They belong here, part of the city's long dream. Leaving the square, you follow a path that slopes gently downward, back toward the water's edge. Here, the ruins give way to open seabed, the remains of the harbour stretching before you. Massive stone blocks lie in irregular lines, the ghost of piers and docks. You swim over what may once have been the channel, the ground beneath you, a mix of sand and the occasional glint of something shaped by human hands. From here, the scale of the city becomes clear. Even in ruin, its reach is impressive. You think of the ships that must have docked here, long, narrow vessels, heavy with goods from far shores, smaller fishing boats returning with their morning catch, ceremonial barges adorned with banners. You imagine the sound of water lapping against the hulls, the calls of sailors, the slow groan of ropes under strain. The hum is softer here, but it is still present, carried through the water from the stones inland. It reminds you that the harbour was not just a place of arrival and departure, but a boundary between worlds, the meeting point of river and sea, of land and water, of the known and the unknown. You float in the middle of that space for a long moment, letting the stillness fill you. The surface above is a pale blur, the city behind you a darker mass. Somewhere, far below, more of Heracleion waits, hidden still, and you have the sense that the deeper you go, the closer you will come to the truths the official story has left untouched. The current shifts gently, and you let it carry you back toward the city. The streets are quiet again, the doorways half closed with silt. You pass the basin in the courtyard, the carved lintel, the narrow alley. Each one feels like a page you have read but will revisit, knowing there are details you missed the first time. Tonight, though, you're content to drift. The city is patient. It has waited centuries to be found. It can wait a little longer to tell you the rest. And as you move through its silent corridors, you carry the sense of all that has been markets and councils, homes and harbours, woven together in the deep, deep, endless fabric of the sea. The water greets you tonight like an old friend, cool at first, then settling into a warmth that wraps around you with quiet acceptance. You slip beneath the surface and feel the world above fall away. Here, the light is softer, filtered through a skin of waves that makes everything shimmer faintly, as though the city waits under a layer of dream. You breathe in slow and deep, letting your shoulders relax, your jaw unclench. The current takes your weight, and you give it freely. The streets you enter now are wider, the buildings taller. The silt is thinner here, as if the water moves more often, keeping the ground cleaner. You pass doorways framed by carved columns, their designs still visible, lotus blooms, papyrus reeds, patterns of waves. The artistry is delicate but not fragile. Even the sea's long patience has not erased it. Somewhere ahead, a glint catches your eye. You move toward it, weaving between the leaning walls. The light sharpens as you draw closer, and then you see it. The bronze head of a statue lying on its side in the sand. It is half the height of your body, the features worn but still strong, the curve of the cheek, the deep-set eyes, the calm, unreadable mouth. You wonder whose likeness it carried. A ruler, a god, a hero. Whatever name it once held is gone now, but the presence remains. As you hover beside it, a vision stirs, not sharp and immediate this time, but hazy, like something remembered from a long time ago. You see the statue whole, standing atop a pedestal in a bustling square. Around it, banners ripple in the wind, their colours vivid against the pale stone. People gather, speaking in low, reverent voices. You catch fragments of words, not enough to understand, but enough to feel their weight. And then, like mist, the vision drifts away. You continue forward. The buildings grow closer together here, the street narrowing into an arched passage. The arch is lined with inscriptions, their grooves dark with age. You run your fingers along them, feeling the depth of each mark. They are not just words, they are channels, carrying meaning like water carries silt. You can almost sense the thoughts of the one who carved them, steady, deliberate, each stroke a vow to be remembered. The passage opens suddenly into a courtyard, and you stop to take it in. It is larger than you expected, with a square pool at its centre. The pool's edges are made of a different stone, darker and smoother than the rest, and it is surprisingly intact. Though the water here is the same sea that fills the rest of the city, you have the odd feeling that this pool still holds its own reflection, waiting for someone to look into it again. You swim closer and peer into its depths. The surface shivers slightly with your movement, then stills. For a moment, the reflection staring back at you is not your own. It is the face of a man with strong features, his hair bound in gold. His eyes are dark and calm, and they look at you with neither welcome nor suspicion, only a kind of quiet recognition. Then the image ripples and breaks, and it is just you again, the faint light glinting off your faceplate. You lean back, the hum of the stones more present now. It moves through your bones, steady and low, like the beat of a slow drum. You think of how this courtyard must have felt in its time. People gathering in the shade, speaking of trade, of journeys, of the weather and the river's moods. You imagine children chasing each other around the pool, their laughter bouncing off the walls. The memory is soft-edged, but it lingers in the corners like light in dust. A low archway leads out of the courtyard. You follow it and find yourself in a hall where the floor is covered with fragments, broken pottery, bits of carved stone, lengths of corroded metal. Some pieces are too small to identify. Others hint at the objects they once were. The curve of a jar's lip, the hilt of a ceremonial blade, the base of a small statue. They rest in no particular order, as if they were dropped here by the retreating sea itself. You pick up a shard of pottery, its surface painted with a faded red design. A bird, perhaps, or a flame. The moment your fingers close around it, a scene blooms in your mind. A feast in a long hall, the air thick with the smell of roasted fish and herbs. People sit in rows, drinking from cups like the one this shard belonged to, their voices rising in celebration. Music plays, drums and strings, the beat steady, the melody winding like a river. The joy in the room is almost tangible, and then, as if someone closed a door, the sound is gone, and you are back in the silent hall beneath the sea. You set the shard down gently. The current stirs the fragments at your feet, shifting them slightly, as if rearranging them for the next visitor. You leave them undisturbed and move on. The hall leads you toward what looks like the remains of a dock, though it is hard to be certain. The ground slopes gently, and large stones jut upward in irregular rows. Between them, the sand is packed tighter, as if once trampled by countless feet. You imagine sailors here, unloading goods from ships, baskets of grain, jars of oil, bolts of linen. You picture the smell of tar and wood, the slap of ropes against wet hulls, the calls of men guiding heavy loads to the market. Above, the broken outlines of buildings frame the pale blur of the surface. You pause to look up, watching the light ripple and scatter. For a moment, you feel as though you could rise straight through it and find yourself in another time entirely, on a bright morning when this place was alive. Instead, you sink a little deeper, drawn by the faint outline of something massive in the sand ahead. As you approach, the shape resolves into a colossal hand carved from stone. Its fingers are half buried, but the visible detail is remarkable. The curve of the knuckles, the veins on the back of the hand, even the faint suggestion of fingernails. You can't help but imagine the statue it once belonged to. Perhaps a god towering above the harbour, blessing all who entered. You hover beside it for a while, tracing the edges with your eyes. The hum here is different, stronger, almost insistent. It seems to pulse in rhythm with your heartbeat. You wonder if this fragment remembers what it once held, if it knows that it still carries a part of the presence it was meant to embody. Finally you turn away, following the slope back toward the heart of the city. These streets feel different now, as if you have crossed an invisible boundary. The carvings on the walls are more intricate, the stonework finer. You pass a narrow window, its frame still intact, and imagine the view it once offered. a glimpse of the bustling street below, the sails of ships beyond, the endless horizon. The hum follows you, softer now, guiding you like a familiar melody. You think again of the official record, of the calm certainty with which it explains the city's fall. And yet, with each step or each slow kick through the water, you feel more certain that there is another story here, one the stones are telling in their own way. You let the current take you deeper into the maze of streets, knowing that somewhere ahead lies the next piece. And in the quiet between heartbeats, the question rises again, gentle but unyielding. Why was it erased from history? The current tonight is slower, almost hesitant, as though it too senses that you are nearing something delicate. You let it guide you along the wide street until the buildings fall away on either side, opening into a space unlike any you've yet seen. It is not a courtyard, not a marketplace, but a broad, flat expanse paved with stones so large they seem impossible to have been placed by human hands. Their edges are straight, their surfaces smooth, and they stretch in careful rows toward the water's edge. Here the silence feels heavier, as if the air, or the water holds its breath. You hover above the stone and notice strange marks along the joints, shallow grooves that run straight for several meters before bending in perfect curves. They are not random scratches. They are too deliberate, too precise. Your fingers trace one of the grooves, and the hum in the stones deepens until it thrums in your chest. It is in this moment that the first true contradiction makes itself known. The official story says Heracleion was built in the 8th century before the Common Era, yet the engineering beneath your hands feels older, far older. The precision of these stones, the way they lock together without mortar, calls to mind other ancient sites scattered across the world, some whose origins remain beyond documented history. You remember the calm voices of the historians, their tidy timelines, and feel a small ripple of doubt move through you. You drift toward the far end of the expanse where the paving stones end in a clean line at the edge of what might once have been a platform or quay. Just beyond, the seabed drops away into a darker blue. You hover at the edge and look down. Massive blocks lie scattered below, each one far too large to have been moved easily by the simple tools the official story allows for. You imagine them once stacked into walls or foundations, now toppled by some immense force. The hum here is different, less like the steady breath of the city, and more like a low, unbroken chord that stretches into the depths. You feel it in the water, in the bones of the place, and somewhere deep inside yourself. You can't say why, but you know it is not just the sea pressing against the stone. As you explore further, you notice something else. Patterns etched faintly into some of the larger blocks. They are geometric interlocking circles, lines that converge into points, repeating triangles. Time has worn them nearly smooth, but they're still visible if you look closely. They do not match the decorative styles you have seen in the temples or markets. These designs feel functional, as if they were part of a code or a map. You pause, letting the water rock you gently. In your mind's eye, the scene shifts. The water fades, replaced by dry air and the heat of a sun far brighter than the filtered light you know here. You stand on this same expanse of stone, but it is whole and clean, its surface glowing pale in the midday light. Figures move across it, tall, robed in white, their faces shaded by hoods. They are not merchants or priests. Their movements are measured, purposeful. Some carry tools, others unroll long sheets marked with the same patterns you saw on the stones. They speak quietly, pointing to certain lines, adjusting something you cannot see. The image blurs, and you are back in the water. You're left with the unsettling sense that this platform was not just part of the city. It may have been here before the city, a foundation upon which Heracleion was later built. You swim along the edge, following the faint path of the grooves. They lead you toward a section of wall still standing several meters high. The wall is unlike others you have seen here. Its stones are larger, its surface unmarked by the inscriptions and reliefs common to later structures. This is the work of builders who valued strength and endurance over decoration. Halfway along the wall, you find a gap where one block has fallen inward, revealing a narrow space behind. You slip through cautiously and find yourself in a sheltered chamber. The light is dim, the water still. The floor is covered in fine sand, undisturbed except for the faint outline of a circle in the center. At first you think it is just a shadow, but as you move closer you see that the circle is carved into the stone itself, perfectly round, no thicker than a finger's width. You run your hand along it and feel a faint vibration, so subtle you almost think you imagined it. You remember the interlocking circles carved into the blocks outside and wonder if this chamber was part of the same design, some system now forgotten. The thought makes you shiver, though the water remains warm. You linger there, listening to the silence. The hum from the stones seems to wrap around you, and in that stillness another thought rises unbidden. Perhaps Heracleion was not the first city here, but the last to stand on ground that had been sacred or strategic for much longer than anyone remembers. Leaving the chamber, you swim back toward the open expanse. The light is shifting now, the moon above moving behind thin clouds, sending ripples of shadow over the ruins. You let your gaze sweep across the stones one last time, memorizing the patterns and the grooves. You know they will stay with you, etched into your mind as surely as they're etched into the rock. The current picks up, carrying you toward a cluster of ruins at the far edge of the platform. Here, the buildings are smaller, their walls broken down to waist height. You pass what might have been a small shrine, its altar toppled, its base still marked by faint lines. Around it lie fragments of statues, a hand, a foot, the curve of a face. You pause at the face. Its eyes are closed, its lips parted just enough to suggest speech. You wonder if it once represented a god or a person, or if it was meant to be both. In the dim light, it seems almost to breathe. The contradiction hangs in your mind now, as constant as the hum. The neat recent history you've been told, and the silent evidence of something much older, much stranger. You think of the grooves, the circles, the massive stones cut with impossible precision. You think of the hooded figures in your vision, working under the bright sun. The city may have vanished 2,000 years ago, but the story beneath it might reach back far beyond that. You drift upward, letting the expanse fall away beneath you. From here, the platform is a pale rectangle against the darker seabed, its lines still sharp despite the centuries. The grooves catch the moonlight in thin silver threads. You imagine what this would look like from high above, perhaps from a ship, perhaps from a point in the sky, and realize it might form a shape too large to see from the ground. The thought lingers as you turn back toward the main body of the city. The streets are familiar now, though each one still holds secrets. Somewhere, deeper in the ruins, you feel certain there are more contradictions waiting. Anomalies that do not fit neatly into the official story. The city is patient. It will show them to you in its own time. For now, you follow the hum steady and low, letting it guide you toward the next layer. The grooves in the stone remain in your mind's eye, looping endlessly like tides, carrying you forward into the unanswered, and with each slow movement through the water, the question comes again. Not sharp, not demanding, but as steady as the sea itself. What really happened here? The streets tonight seem narrower, though you cannot tell if it is because the walls have crept closer in the dark or because your mind has become more focused, tuned to smaller details. The city feels quieter than usual, even for a place that has slept for centuries. You move slowly, letting the water's gentle sway match the rhythm of your breath, knowing that sometimes it is in the smallest, most forgotten corners that the deepest truths hide. Ahead, a faint glimmer catches your eye. It is not the hard reflection of metal or the pale gleam of stone, but something softer, more elusive like light filtering through old glass. You follow it, weaving between leaning walls until you emerge into a small enclosed space. 3 walls still stand here, their tops jagged, the 4th side open to the ruins beyond. In the centre rises a stone pedestal, waist high, its surface carved with faint lines worn thin by time. You move closer and the light shifts. It is not coming from above but from within. Tiny flashes caught in the sand that has settled in the carvings. You brush some away, revealing shapes, curling lines like waves, broken by symbols that are not like the hieroglyphs you've seen elsewhere in the city. They are simpler, older, almost abstract triangles, spirals, intersecting arcs. The hum here is faint but steady, like a quiet note held in the background. You rest your hand on the stone, and in that instant the air changes. The water is gone, replaced by the warm stillness of night on dry land. You stand in this same space, though. The walls are whole and painted with deep colours that gleam in torchlight. The pedestal is bare, its carvings fresh and sharp. Around you, a small group of people gathers. They're dressed differently from the citizens you have seen in other visions. Plainer robes, no jewellery, their heads bare. One of them, an older woman with a narrow face and steady eyes, places a small object on the pedestal. It is no larger than her palm, carved from dark stone. She speaks, her voice low and deliberate. The words unknown to you, but the meaning unmistakable. She is telling a story. The others listen in perfect silence. When she finishes, the object is lifted and passed from one person to the next, each holding it for a moment before setting it back down. Then, without a word, they leave the space one by one, their footsteps fading into the night. The vision dissolves, and you are back in the water. The pedestal stands silent, the sand settling again into its grooves. Whatever object once rested here is gone, but its presence lingers. You sense that it was not an ornament or a tool, but something meant to carry memory, a key, perhaps, to a story too important to lose. You leave the small enclosure and follow a narrow lane that twists between buildings. The walls here are rougher, the stones less even, as though built in haste or repaired many times. Along one wall, faint paintings still cling to the stone, the outline of a boat with a curved prow, figures with arms outstretched, waves drawn in repeating patterns. The colours are faded, but the shapes are still clear enough to suggest a journey. You pause before the boat. Its prow is unlike the ones you've seen in depictions of Nile vessels. It rises higher, curling forward like a hook, and the waves beneath it are not the gentle ripples of a river, but the sharp crests of open sea. You trace the lines, wondering if this is a record of travel far beyond the delta. If so, it means that the people here had knowledge, and perhaps contact beyond what the official record allows. The lane opens suddenly into another courtyard, this one ringed with low benches. In its centre stands a tall, slender column, carved from a single piece of stone. Its surface is covered in spiralling lines from base to top, each one so precise it looks as if it could have been drawn yesterday. You drift closer, letting your fingers follow the spirals upward. The hum here is stronger, resonating faintly through the column itself. As you touch it, the space shifts again. The water becomes air, the ruins whole. The benches are filled with people, men, women, even children, watching as two figures stand at the base of the column. One holds a staff tipped with a piece of polished stone that catches the sunlight. The other speaks, gesturing to the spirals as if explaining something. The people lean forward, listening intently. You cannot hear the words, but you feel the sense of instruction, of passing down knowledge. Then, just as quickly, the vision fades, leaving only the column and its silent spirals. You realize that this place was not a marketplace or a temple, but a gathering space for teaching. Perhaps for preserving knowledge that was not meant to be lost to time or tide. You leave the courtyard, the image of the column still in your mind, and follow another street that leads toward the edge of the ruins. The buildings thin out here, giving way to open ground littered with smaller stones and fragments of pottery. You pass a low rectangular block half buried in sand, its surface polished smooth. Along one edge is a single Markan arc with a point at one end. It is simple, yet feels deliberate, like the signature of someone who knew exactly what it meant. The hum is quieter here, but it is still present, a reminder that even the scattered edges of the city carry the same undercurrent of memory. You move on, letting the current pull you toward a shadow in the distance. As you draw nearer, it resolves into the remains of a small shrine. Its walls are barely more than outlines now, but the base of the altar remains. On it lies a flat stone tablet, its surface covered in symbols unlike any you have seen so far. They are angular, with sharp corners and straight lines, almost geometric. You hover above it, tracing them in your mind, trying to imagine the hand that carved them. They look less like a language and more like a diagram, a map perhaps, or a record of some event. The water moves faintly around you, and you sense that this place too was part of a network of small shrines, scattered through the city, each holding a piece of a larger puzzle. If one were lost, the others would still carry the knowledge forward. It is a quiet, resilient way to remember, to guard against forgetting. You rest there for a moment, letting the weight of that realization settle. This city was not only a port, not only a religious center, it was a keeper of stories, of knowledge, of something it believed must survive even if the walls and streets did not. The current calls you back toward the center of the ruins, the hum growing stronger as you move. You pass again the column with its spirals, the painted wall with its strange boat, the pedestal that once held an object of memory. Each feels like a thread, and you know they are all part of the same weave, and somewhere in that weave is the contradiction. A history that speaks of a city born in the 8th century BCE, and a reality that suggests roots far deeper, tangled with voyages and symbols and knowledge that belong to another time entirely. As you drift through the streets, the question returns, steady and soft. Who were they really? And what did they know that we have forgotten? The sea is quiet tonight, the kind of quiet that feels like an invitation. You slip beneath the surface and let yourself sink, deeper than before, until the familiar outlines of Heracleion streets begin to form below. The city waits in its patient silence, the hum in the stones, rising slowly to meet you. You've learned by now that this is how it speaks, not in sudden revelations, but in a steady rhythm, a low voice that can be heard only if you are willing to slow yourself to match it. Tonight, the current pulls you toward the far western edge of the ruins, where the water is darker and the silt thicker. The buildings here are smaller, their walls broken almost to the ground. They seem forgotten even within the forgotten city. Yet something about the way the streets bend toward this place feels purposeful, as though they were designed to lead here. You pass through a narrow gap between two leaning walls, brushing aside strands of seaweed. On the other side, you find a single, wide block of stone set into the ground. It is unadorned, its surface smooth except for a faint indentation in the center. A shallow bowl, just large enough to hold a hand. You float above it, sensing that this place was not meant for crowds. It feels private, hidden in plain sight. The hum here is different. Not the broad resonance of the temples or plazas, but something more focused, like a single note played on a string. You lower yourself until your hand rests in the shallow bowl. The stone is cool, even through the water. The moment your palm meets it, a rush of images fills your mind. You see not the city, but a piece of parchment, its edges curled, its surface marked with lines and shapes. It is a map, but not of Heracleion alone. The coastline is different. The island shifted, as if drawn from a time when the land and sea were not where you know them to be. Lines cross the water in sweeping arcs, connecting distant shores. At certain points, small symbols mark the intersections, circles, triangles, spirals. They look like the carvings you've seen on the great stones, and something deep within you knows they mean more than mere locations. The vision fades, leaving you staring down at the empty stone. You realize your breath has slowed even more, your whole body relaxed as though the hum itself has drawn the tension from you. This was not just a marker. It was a place to remember routes to places now lost, perhaps even to times before this city was built. You push gently away and let the current carry you further west. The seabed drops slightly and the ruins thin out, replaced by large, scattered stones half buried in the sand. These are not cut like the walls of houses or temples. They are massive, weathered, some with strange angles that make them seem less like debris and more like pieces of a structure whose purpose is no longer clear. One block catches your attention. Its surface bears a faint grid of lines, worn nearly smooth. You brush the silt away and see that the lines are not random. They intersect at precise intervals, forming a pattern far too deliberate to be natural. The grid pulls your mind back to the map in your vision, the way the arcs crossed and formed points. You cannot shake the feeling that this block is part of something larger, perhaps even a fragment of that same design. The hum grows deeper, though it remains soft, as if the stones here are speaking from far away. You follow it until you reach a narrow ridge of rock that rises from the seabed. It is not part of the city. Its texture is different, rougher, but along its side is a carved groove that runs perfectly straight for several meters before disappearing into the sand. You trail your hand along it, and feel the same subtle vibration you noticed in the chamber with the perfect circle. It occurs to you that these marks, these grooves, might connect across the city, perhaps even beyond it. Not in the way roads connect, but as part of a network lines and shapes laid into the land itself, a geometry meant to be seen from above or understood only by those who knew how to read it. The current draws you back toward the ruins proper, where the stones rise higher from the seabed. You come to a building whose roof is gone, but whose walls still stand almost to their full height. Inside, the floor is covered in mosaics, tiny pieces of coloured stone and glass arranged into patterns that twist and loop like waves. In the centre is a large circle, its border marked by alternating light and dark tiles. Within it, the design is complex, interlocking arcs, overlapping spirals, small symbols tucked into the spaces between. You hover over it, tracing the lines with your eyes. They are beautiful, but they also feel functional, as if they were meant to convey something. You think again of the map, the grid, the grooves carved into stone. Perhaps this mosaic is not decoration, but a translation, a way to fix the knowledge into a form that could survive even if the words were lost. The hum here is strong, resonating in the walls and floor until it feels as though you are floating inside a single note. You close your eyes and let it settle over you. In the darkness behind your eyelids, the mosaic begins to glow, the lines brightening until they form not a flat design but a three-dimensional shape. You see it rise from the floor, a sphere marked with the same lines and arcs, spinning slowly in the air. You understand, without knowing how, that it is not just a representation of the world, but of something larger, the paths between places, the points where they meet, the flows that connect them. When you open your eyes, the image is gone, and only the mosaic remains, worn but still whole. You take one last look before leaving, committing its design to memory. Outside, the streets feel different now. You notice the angles where they meet, the way certain doorways align with distant markers, the repeating symbols carved into corners. You begin to see the geometry beneath the city's layout, the way it reflects the same patterns in the mosaic and the grooves in the map. It is as though the city itself was built to be part of this larger network, each wall and street another line in an equation written across the land. The official history speaks of Heracleion as a port, a hub of trade and worship, a casualty of the shifting earth and sea. But walking or drifting through these streets, you see another possibility. That was also a node in something far older, a web of places connected not just by water and commerce, but by knowledge. The current tugs at you again, pulling you toward the heart of the ruins. The hum follows, no longer just in the stones but in you, as if you are now carrying a piece of it. You pass familiar landmarks, the toppled columns, the quiet courtyards, but they look different now, as though you're seeing the lines beneath their surfaces. Somewhere ahead, you know, the city will reveal more, but for now, the patterns are enough. They are the first clear glimpse of a language you've only just begun to understand. And as the water rocks you gently in its slow rhythm, the thought settles into you with quiet certainty. Heracleon's story was never meant to be told in words alone. The water feels cooler tonight, a slow, steady current moving through the ruins like breath through a sleeping body. You drift down into the familiar darkness, but the city seems to hold itself differently now, its lines and shapes sharper, as though it knows you've begun to understand the patterns beneath its surface. The hum is there immediately, resonating low and even in the stones, and you fall into its rhythm without effort. You let the current guide you toward the centre of the city. The streets here are wider, the walls taller, and there is a sense of deliberate order in the way they are placed. Every angle, every turn, seems to follow a logic that is more than practical. It is as though the city's design itself was part of a ritual, a reflection of the patterns you have seen in the grooves, the mosaics, the maps. You pass through a broad archway into what must once have been a civic plaza. Even in ruin, it is vast, the paving stones laid in precise rows that converge toward a central point. At that point stands a single structure, still upright despite the centuries, a square platform with steps leading up on all four sides. Its top is empty now, but you can almost see what once stood there, perhaps an obelisk, perhaps a statue, perhaps something more functional, a marker or an instrument. You swim slowly around it, tracing the steps with your eyes. The edges are worn but still sharp enough to suggest that this was built to last. On the northern face you notice something strange, a series of indentations running down the side, evenly spaced, as if they once held metal fittings or supported something that rose high above the plaza. The official account would call this a ceremonial platform, perhaps used for speeches or public rites. But here, in the silence, it feels like something else, a centre point, the heart of the city's geometry. You lay a hand against the stone, and the hum deepens. For a moment, the plaza shifts around you. The broken walls rise whole again. The missing obelisk reappears in pale stone streaked with gold, and the air is warm with sunlight. People fill the plaza, standing in orderly lines, their attention fixed on the obelisk. At its base, a small group of robed figures moves in careful patterns, placing objects at precise points on the steps. Small bowls, polished stones, bundles of herbs. The air smells faintly of smoke and resin. You cannot hear their words, but you feel their intent. This is an alignment, a marking of time, a way of fixing the city within the great wheel of seasons and stars. The obelisk glints in the sun, and for a moment you think you see the shadow it casts fall exactly along the line of one of the streets you walked earlier, the street that led to the mosaic hall. The connection is clear. This is not just a gathering place. It is part of the city's instrument for measuring the world. The vision fades, and you're left with the quiet platform, the steps worn by centuries of silt and tide. You push away, letting the current carry you to the edge of the plaza, where a row of columns stands like sentinels. Most are broken, but one remains whole, its surface carved with a long inscription. The letters are large, their grooves still deep. You cannot read them, but the spacing and flow suggest they were meant to be seen from a distance. You circle the column slowly. At its base, half hidden by sand, is a carved disc set into the pavement. Its edges are chipped, but the design remains, a series of concentric circles crossed by straight lines radiating from the centre. The lines point directly to the four sides of the platform, and beyond that, to the streets themselves. You realise that the entire plaza is a map not of the city in isolation, but of the city as a piece of a larger whole. You leave the column and swim toward the southern edge of the plaza, where the ground slopes downward into a long, narrow corridor. The walls here are planed, but the floor is marked with shallow grooves, parallel and evenly spaced. They run the entire length of the corridor, guiding you toward a small chamber at the far end. Inside, the chamber is simple. 4 walls, a flat floor, and a raised stone in the centre. On the stone lies an object so small you almost miss it. A cube of dark stone, each side no larger than your palm. You pick it up, turning it in your hands. On each face, a different pattern is carved. A spiral, a grid, a triangle, a wave, a circle, and a cluster of dots. The moment you touch the last face, the hum changes. It becomes faster, sharper, like a drumbeat accelerating. The chamber fades, replaced by an image that is not of the city, but of the sky stars wheeling overhead, their paths traced in glowing lines that form the same shapes carved into the cube. The spirals, the triangles, the grids, they are not abstract at all. They are maps of the heavens. The image fades, and you are back in the chamber. You set the cube down carefully. You understand now that the plaza, the platform, the streets, the mosaics, all of it is tied to the sky. The city was not only built to face the river and the sea, but also to mirror the patterns above. You swim back into the corridor, your mind turning over this realization. The official record speaks of a city built for trade, for ceremony, for devotion to its gods. It says nothing of the stars, nothing of alignments or instruments. Yet here, beneath the water, the evidence is carved into the very bones of the place. When you return to the plaza, the light from above has shifted. Through the broken stones, narrow beams of moonlight fall across the platform and the surrounding streets. By chance, or perhaps by design, the brightest of them falls exactly along the northern stair, touching the place where the obelisk once stood. You hover there for a long moment, imagining what it must have been like to stand here on the night when moon and city and sea all aligned. The current stirs again, urging you to move on. You take one last look at the plaza before following the flow back into the winding streets. The hum follows you, not just in the stones but in your own heartbeat, steady and low. You know now that this city was more than it seemed, and that its true purpose was hidden in plain sight, in the lines of its streets, in the tilt of its walls, in the shadows it cast when the sun or moon stood in just the right place. And as the water rocks you gently forward, the question comes again, deeper now, threaded through with something like awe. Was Heracleion built to serve the people who lived in it, or to serve the stars themselves? The sea seems restless tonight. You feel it in the way the current shifts against your skin, in the way the silt stirs on the seabed and rises in slow, twisting clouds. It is not violent, just unsettled, as though the water knows you're about to tread into ideas that strain against the neat edges of the official record. You let it carry you downward, past the familiar outlines of streets and courtyards, until the city surrounds you again. The hum is waiting for you. You hear it before your feet brush the sand, a low, resonant note that feels deeper than sound. It threads itself into your bones, reminding you that you're not simply here to see, you are here to listen. And tonight, you know you are stepping beyond what is written in any approved history. You follow a street that curves away from the central plaza, its stones cracked and uneven. The buildings on either side are tall but stripped bare, their walls unpainted, their carvings sparse. It feels different from the rest of the city, more utilitarian, less adorned, as though this district was built for function rather than display. At the end of the street you find an open space. In the centre stands a massive circular platform, its surface smooth and unbroken except for a single shallow groove that runs across it in a perfect arc. The platform is ringed with low, evenly spaced pillars, each no higher than your waist. They form a perfect circle, their tops flat and polished. You drift closer, tracing your hand along one of the pillars. The hum sharpens, becoming more focused, more directional, as though each pillar carries its own note. You imagine standing here in the open air, the circle of pillars casting shadows that shift with the sun. You begin to suspect that this was not a marketplace or a ceremonial space, but something far more precise, perhaps an instrument for observing the heavens, marking the movement of stars and seasons. The moment you rest your hand on the platform itself, the world changes. The water fades. You are standing in the circle, the night sky blazing above you. The pillars are unbroken, their tops crowned with small bronze discs that glint in the starlight. A group of people moves among them, adjusting the discs, checking their alignment with points in the sky. They speak little, their movements deliberate, as though each adjustment matters greatly. You follow their gaze upward and see the constellations mapped in clean lines, their shapes matching the symbols you've seen carved into stone, the spirals, the triangles, the grids. It clicks into place. This was not just a city of trade and worship. It was part of a network that tracked the heavens with a precision that would astonish even now. The vision fades, but the truth it carried remains. You drift back from the platform, the pillars now silent and still beneath the sea. The official account of Heracleion speaks of religious devotion, of commerce, of geological fate. But it does not speak of this, of a city that was not only a crossroads of cultures, but also a node in an ancient system of observation, perhaps even communication. You leave the circle and follow another street, narrower now, its paving stones interrupted by patches of sand. Along one wall, you find a series of shallow niches, each containing a carved slab. The carvings are faint, their edges softened by time, but you recognize the patterns. They are not depictions of gods or rulers, but of structures like the one you just left. Circles, grids, and arcs, always set against markings that resemble stars. It occurs to you that these slabs might be records of other places, sister sites scattered across distant lands. If that is true, then Heracleion was not unique, but one of many, each aligned to a different part of the sky, each perhaps sharing knowledge with the others. The thought is dizzying. You move on, and the street leads you toward a low building that has partially collapsed. Inside, the floor is littered with fragments of pottery, each piece painted with the same repeating motif. A line curving into a spiral, ending in a small circle. You pick one up, turning it in your hands. The paint is faded, but the shape is unmistakable. It is the same spiral you have seen carved into the city's stones, laid into its mosaics, even marked on the small cube in the plaza chamber. The spiral is everywhere in this city, hidden and overt, as though it was the signature of its builders. You think of the way it appears in nature, in shells, in whirlpools, in the path of galaxies, and wonder if the people of Heracleion saw it as more than a pattern. Perhaps it was a principle, a law, a way of understanding the universe itself. You set the shard back among its scattered pieces and return to the open street. The current has shifted again, this time drawing you toward the edge of the ruins. You follow it until the seabed drops sharply, revealing a wide trench. The walls of the trench are steep, their surfaces marked with horizontal cuts that look almost like steps. You descend into it slowly. The light fades as you go deeper, but the hum grows stronger, until it is the only thing you can feel besides the water's weight. At the bottom, half buried in silt, you find another circle, this one carved directly into the rock of the trench wall. Its diameter is larger than your outstretched arms, and its surface is so smooth it feels almost unnatural. You lay your hand against it, and for an instant, you are elsewhere. Not in the city, not even in this part of the world. You see another place, lit by the same moonlight, its stones arranged in shapes you know, but have never walked. You see the same carvings, the same spirals, the same alignments with the stars. And then it is gone, leaving only the dark water and the circle in the rock. You surface from the trench slowly, your mind turning over what you have just experienced. If the vision was true, then Heracleion was linked to other sites, not just through trade or shared culture, but through something older, something that transcended distance. The official story does not allow for such connections. It holds to the visible, the measurable, the explainable. But here, beneath the water, you have touched pieces of a network that existed long before anyone gave this city its recorded name. The hum eases as you drift back into shallower water, the streets of the city rising around you once more. You pass the circular platform with its pillars, the building with its carved slabs, the collapsed room with its painted shards. Each feels like part of the same message, though you can only read fragments. And as you glide through the silent lanes, the question shifts again. It is no longer, why was Heracleion erased from history? But what knowledge sank with it, and who decided it should never rise again? The city feels stiller tonight, as though it has drawn its breath inward. The current that so often nudges you along is absent, leaving the water heavy and unmoving. You descend slowly, feeling the silence wrap around you in thicker layers with each meter. When your feet touch the sand between the leaning walls, the hum greets you. Not loud, not insistent, but steady, as if it has been waiting for you to arrive at this precise moment. You begin in a part of the city you have not yet explored, where the streets form irregular angles, instead of the measured grid you've come to recognize. The walls are lower here, many of them collapsed entirely, but the foundations are strong. Even in ruin, the shapes of the buildings hint at careful placement corners, aligned to distant points, doorways angled to catch light from a specific direction. The hum pulls you toward a narrow alley that ends in a shadowed archway. Inside, the space is small and square, the floor covered in a fine layer of white sand. In the center stands a single slab of dark stone, waist high, its surface engraved with lines so fine they are barely visible. You brush away the silt, revealing a series of intersecting arcs. They remind you of the lines you've seen in the mosaics and maps, but here they are etched with such precision that they seem almost machine-made. When you place your palm flat against the stone, the water disappears. You stand in the same room, but the walls are intact, the air warm and still. The dark stone glows faintly from within, illuminating the lines on its surface. Across from you stands a figure in a robe the colour of the sea before dawn. Their face is shadowed, but you feel the weight of their attention. They gesture toward the stone, tracing one of the arcs with their fingertip. It glows brighter, and as it does, you see that it is part of a much larger pattern, one that extends far beyond the edges of the slab, perhaps beyond the room, perhaps beyond the city itself. The figure looks at you as though to say, "Remember this." And then the vision fades, leaving only the silent stone beneath your hand. You let go. but the memory of the glowing arc stays with you. You step back into the alley and notice something you hadn't before. The way the light from the broken ceiling above falls directly onto the slab at this hour. Even under the water, you can see the faint shift in brightness. You imagine how, on land, the sunlight would have struck the stone cleanly, perhaps only on certain days of the year. This was not a random room. It was part of the city's way of marking time, of tying the rhythms of the sky to the patterns in the stone. You follow the alley until it opens into a larger courtyard. Here, the ground is paved with massive blocks fitted so perfectly together that even after centuries underwater, you can barely slide a finger between them. At the centre of the courtyard is a circular depression, its edges lined with low steps. It could be a pool, but it feels too deep for that, and the edges are carved with the same spirals and triangles you've seen elsewhere. As you approach, the hum grows stronger. You kneel at the edge and peer into the depression. The bottom is covered in a mosaic, its colours muted but still visible. It depicts a great circle surrounded by smaller circles, all connected by lines that radiate outward. It could be a map of the heavens, or of the earth, or of something that blends the two. You reach down, your fingers brushing the tiny stones, and for a moment you feel a pull, not physical, but in your mind, as though the mosaic is drawing you into its centre. The scene shifts again. You see the courtyard as it was, filled with people standing at the edges, looking down into the depression. In the centre, a man stands on a raised platform pointing to different parts of the mosaic while speaking. The crowd listens in silence, some nodding, others tracing the patterns in the air with their hands. The man points upward, and you follow his gesture to see the night sky. Its stars arranged in the same pattern as the mosaic beneath him. You realize this was a place of teaching, of transferring knowledge from one generation to the next. Not a school in the modern sense, but something older, more integrated, a space where the city's sacred geometry and astronomical knowledge were one and the same. The vision fades, and you're once more in the silent courtyard, the mosaic dim in the filtered light. You step away and explore the perimeter, finding that each corner of the courtyard has a small niche carved into the wall. Inside each is a stone disc, about the size of your hand, engraved with a different symbol: a wave, a spiral, a starburst, and a triangle. They are simple, yet they feel important, as though they were keys to something larger. You leave the courtyard and move toward the western wall, where a narrow passage leads downward. The floor here slopes steeply, and the stones underfoot are slick with algae. At the bottom, the passage opens into a chamber unlike any you've seen before. Its ceiling is low, and its walls are completely covered in carvings, lines, circles, and symbols so densely packed that there is hardly any bare stone. You drift along the walls, your hand brushing over the carvings. The hum here is different, layered, as if multiple voices are speaking at once. Some of the patterns match what you've seen elsewhere, but others are new, more complex, almost mathematical. They spiral inward, then out again, connecting in ways that make your eyes want to follow their paths endlessly. At the far end of the chamber, you find a small alcove. Inside lies a stone tablet, half buried in sand. You pull it free and turn it over. On one side is an image of the city, rendered in lines so clean they might have been drawn yesterday. But the proportions are strange. The harbour is smaller, the coastline different, the streets arranged in a slightly altered pattern. It takes you a moment to realise what you're looking at. This is not a depiction of the city as it is, but as it was, perhaps before the sea began to claim it. On the reverse side is another map, but it is not of the city at all. It shows a series of points connected by arcs, much like the patterns on the glowing slab. Some points are marked with small symbols, the spiral, the wave, the triangle, matching the discs in the courtyard niches. You recognize a few of the positions from your own world, but others are far beyond any coast you know. The hum deepens, and a thought comes unbidden. This was their network. Not just trade routes, not just cultural connections, but something older and more deliberate, a web of knowledge woven across lands and seas, anchored in places like this one. You set the tablet back in its alcove and leave the chamber, the patterns on its wall still spinning in your mind. When you emerge into the open water again, the city feels different. These streets are no longer random paths through ruins. They are lines in a larger design, each one pointing to something beyond itself. As you drift upward, letting the city fall away beneath you, you feel the hum still in your chest, the question you've carried for so long. Why was it erased from history is beginning to shift into something deeper, something heavier. What would it mean if this city's true purpose was never meant for everyone to know? The current tonight is slow and heavy, almost reluctant, as if the sea itself weighs the choice of whether to reveal more. You descend through its dim blue folds until the shapes of Heracleion gather around you again. Walls leaning like tired sentinels, columns rising from the sand in fractured ranks, streets that seem to lead both forward and backward in time. The hum greets you before your feet touch the ground, but it is different now. There's a caution in it, a muted quality, as if it knows what comes next will not be easy to hold. You let the water guide you along a familiar avenue, past the grand plaza with its silent platform, and the column bearing its concentric map. The hum here is strong, but you move past it, deeper into the city's less travelled quarters, where the buildings stand lower and the streets twist in irregular lines. The silt is thicker here, stirred only when you pass. At last the avenue narrows into a corridor between two high walls, leading to a half-collapsed archway. Beyond it lies a square courtyard surrounded by broken colonnades. In the centre stands a low structure of black stone, its surface uncarved but polished smooth. The hum concentrates here, like water funneled into a narrow stream. You approach slowly, laying your hand on the stone. At once the water around you thickens and your vision tilts. The city fades, replaced by a chamber dimly lit by oil lamps. The same black stone stands in the centre, but here it is covered by a cloth embroidered with spirals and arcs. Around it 6 figures stand in silence, their faces hidden by hoods. One speaks, a man's voice, low and deliberate. His words are not in any tongue you know, but their cadence is steady, almost ritualistic. Another answers, a woman's voice, firm but quiet. The exchange is brief. Then one by one, they place objects on the stone. A small tablet, a bundle of reeds, a sealed clay jar, a folded piece of cloth, a shard of worked metal, and finally a scroll bound with a leather cord. When all 6 are in place, they step back. The man speaks again, and the lamps are extinguished, plunging the room into darkness. The vision fades and you are back in the courtyard. The stone is bare now, the offerings long gone, but the sense of deliberate secrecy lingers. This was no public rite. It was a meeting meant to be hidden. You circle the courtyard, tracing your fingers along the bases of the columns. In some places, faint carvings remain. A spiral paired with a wave, a triangle paired with a circle. These are the same symbols you've seen scattered across the city, but here they are paired, as though linked in meaning. You begin to wonder if these were marks of alliance, or of shared purpose between different parts of the network you've glimpsed. One column base is different. Its carving is deeper, fresher, as though it was made more recently than the rest. The symbol is one you haven't seen before. Two overlapping arcs, forming a shape like an eye. Beneath it is a short line of text, too worn to read, but enough to suggest that this place was important until the very end. The hum shifts, drawing you toward a narrow doorway at the courtyard's edge. You slip inside and find yourself in a long, low room. Shelves line the walls, though they are empty now, their wooden frames rotted away. The floor is littered with bits of pottery, shards of stone tablets, broken seals. You pick up one shard and see the faint remains of a spiral carved into it. As you kneel to return it to the floor, you notice something odd. The stone beneath the silt is not level. You brush it clean to reveal the edge of a square panel, slightly raised from the surrounding floor. You press your hand against it, and with a faint groan of stone, it shifts. Beneath it is a hollow space just large enough for a small chest. The chest is gone, but the imprint it left in the sand is clear. You sit back, imagining what might have been hidden here. Documents, artifacts, something small but significant enough to protect. The secrecy of the meeting, the paired symbols, the hidden compartment, together they suggest that certain knowledge was kept apart from the public, preserved for only a select few. The official history makes no mention of factions within the city, no hint that some knowledge was guarded even from its own people. Yet here, in the quiet of this half-buried room, the idea feels undeniable. The network you've glimpsed may have been vast, but perhaps it was not open to all. Perhaps it was meant only for those entrusted to carry it forward, or to hide it when the time came. You leave the room and step back into the courtyard. The water is still, the columns casting long shadows across the silt. In your mind, you see again the 6 figures around the black stone, their faces hidden, their offerings placed in silence. You wonder if they knew what was coming, if they were preparing for the city's end, not to save its walls or streets, but to preserve its knowledge by scattering it, hiding it in places the sea could not reach. The hum softens, and you feel the current change, drawing you away from the courtyard and back toward the broader streets. You pass the plaza again, the obelisk long gone but its steps still catching the light. You think of how easily history can be shaped by what is left visible, and how much can be erased simply by hiding it away. As you move deeper into the city, the question sharpens in your mind. You've always wondered why Heracleion was erased from history, but now another question takes shape alongside it. Who chose to erase it? Was it the sea, indifferent and unstoppable? Or was it people, perhaps the very ones who guarded its greatest secrets, deciding that it was better for the city to be forgotten than for its knowledge to fall into the wrong hands? You drift to a stop between 2 weathered walls, letting the hum settle around you. The answer does not come, but you feel the weight of the possibility. The city may have fallen to disaster, but disaster can be made to serve those who know how to use it. The water presses gently against you, the silence deepening. Somewhere ahead there will be more symbols, more traces of the hidden network, more fragments of the choices made here in the city's final days. But for now, you let the thought rest, like a sealed chest in the sand, waiting for the right hands to open it. The water greets you tonight with a slow, swaying calm, as though the sea itself has settled into a deep meditation. You descend through the dim light, following the familiar shapes of Heracleion as they emerge from the haze. The hum meets you almost at once, steady and warm, like the low note of a distant drum. It carries no urgency, only a sense of patience, of continuity. The city has been waiting for you again. You follow the current into a part of the ruins you haven't yet explored. Here the streets are narrower, winding between smaller buildings whose walls are worn to rounded edges. The carvings are faint, but in some places the stone holds traces of painted colour blue and red. So faded they seem more like memories than pigments. You pause at one doorway and notice a strip of paint in a pattern of alternating triangles. You've seen this motif before, in mosaics and in the hidden chamber where the glowing arcs were shown to you. It feels like another quiet signature of the same unseen hand. The alley opens suddenly into a wider space, and the first thing you see is the statue. It stands nearly twice your height, carved from pale stone, its features softened by centuries beneath the water. The figure is neither god nor ruler, but something more abstract, a human form whose arms extend forward, palms open as if offering. Between the hands, a shallow bowl is carved directly into the stone. The bowl is empty now, filled only with drifting silt, but the posture is unmistakable. This is a gesture of giving. You rest your fingers along the rim of the bowl, and the water around you shifts. The statue straightens, the stone becomes warm skin, and you find yourself standing in the same square in another time. The air smells faintly of smoke and salt. People move quietly here, each carrying something small, a piece of bread, a folded cloth, a handful of grain. One by one, they place their offerings into the bowl, then step back with bowed heads. The mood is solemn but not mournful. There is a sense of shared purpose. You look closer at the faces of the people. They are not only locals, you see strangers in clothing from other lands, bearing the marks of long travel. This is not just a neighbourhood rite. It is a gathering of many converging here for a reason. The vision fades, and you are back in the still water, the statue empty-handed once more. You drift around the square, taking in the surrounding walls. In 3 of them are small alcoves, each containing an object carved from stone, a spiral, a wave, and a starburst. The 4th alcove is empty. You can't help but wonder if it once held the triangle, completing the set you've seen scattered throughout the city. Perhaps it was removed, hidden before the city sank. The hum deepens, drawing you toward a narrow street that leads out of the square. The buildings here are in better condition, their walls standing almost to their original height. As you pass one doorway, you catch sight of a mural on the interior wall. Though faded, its subject is still clear. A great ship with a high, curved prow, sailing on water marked by long, sweeping waves. Above it is a pattern of stars, arranged to match the mosaic in the Teachin courtyard. You move closer, tracing the lines of the stars with your eyes. The ship is unlike those used on the Nile. Its hull is broader, its sails shaped differently. You think of the painted boat you saw earlier in another quarter of the city, and realize this is no isolated image. These ships were known here, perhaps even built here, designed for journeys beyond the river and into open sea. Following the street further, you come to a small plaza where the ground slopes gently toward what must once have been a canal or dock. The water here feels different, colder, with a faint pull, as though the sea is still connected to this place through some unseen channel. Along the edge of the plaza are more statues, smaller than the one with open palms. These figures are seated, each holding a tablet across their knees. The tablets are blank now, their surfaces worn smooth, but their posture suggests they were once readers, keepers of written knowledge. You kneel before one and let your hand rest where the tablet would have been. For an instant you see it whole again, its surface covered in neat rows of symbols, some familiar, others entirely unknown. The figure's face is calm, but the eyes seem to watch you directly. The hum sharpens, as if encouraging you to remember, and then the image fades, leaving only stone beneath your touch. As you move on, the buildings grow fewer, replaced by open ground scattered with low walls and broken columns. The land slopes upward here, and you find yourself approaching a raised platform overlooking the plaza and the canal. The platform's surface is engraved with lines radiating outward from a single point, like the spokes of a wheel. Each line aligns with a feature in the city, the plaza, the statue with open palms, the teaching courtyard, even the great circular platform you saw in the observational district. It dawns on you that this platform is more than a vantage point, it is a key. Standing here, you could see the city as a whole, its structures arranged like points on a map, each aligned not only to each other, but to something beyond the city's borders. You imagine how, from this spot in the days before the sea claimed it, a person could track the sun, the stars, and perhaps even the movement of ships coming and going along invisible lines of connection. The official record of Heracleion has no room for this, no place for a city that functioned as both a port and an instrument, part of a network that stretched far beyond its own shores. And yet here it is, etched into stone, obvious to anyone willing to look from the right perspective. You step down from the platform and wander back toward the canal. The water here laps quietly against the broken stone edges. You imagine ships moored here long ago, their hulls creaking, their sails furled. Goods would have been unloaded, yes, but perhaps other things too. Maps, records, fragments of knowledge carried from other lands and entrusted to the keepers of this city. The hum softens, as if the city has finished saying what it meant to in this part of its memory. You follow the current back through the narrow streets, past the murals and the statues, until you reach the square once more. The open-palmed figure stands in its patient stillness, silt drifting gently into its empty bowl. You think again of the people who gathered here, offering what they could. Perhaps it was not the value of the gift that mattered, but the act of giving itself, a way of becoming part of something larger, of acknowledging the city's place not just as a home, but as a keeper of the threads that bound far-off places together. As you drift away, you realize that the question in your mind has shifted once more. It is no longer just, why was the city erased? But who, beyond its walls, was connected to it? And what did they lose when it was gone? The answer, you suspect, lies in the same currents that once brought ships to these docks, currents that even now, beneath the silence, are still moving. The water feels warmer tonight, wrapping around you like a deep exhale. You let yourself sink slowly, as though the city below is pulling you down not with force, but with the quiet certainty that it has something more to show you. The hum meets you halfway, steady and lo, the same note that has been with you since your first step into these submerged streets. Only now, it carries something extra, an undercurrent of anticipation. You arrive above the familiar rooftops and avenues, but tonight you don't stay in the upper streets. The current nudges you toward a fissure in the ruins, a place where the city has broken away, revealing a descent into its deeper layers. The walls here are jagged, columns leaning like the ribs of some great creature, their bases disappearing into the sand. You follow the path downward until the light from above dims, replaced by the softer glow of your own presence against the stone. At the base of the slope, you enter a chamber half filled with silt. Its ceiling is low, but the walls are vast, stretching away in a circle that encloses you like the inside of a great drum. Carved into them are symbols, larger than any you've seen before, spirals as tall as a person, interlocking arcs, rows of circles punctuated by sharp triangles. The patterns pulse faintly in the light, as if they have been waiting for centuries to be seen again. You step closer, running your hand along the grooves. The hum deepens, and with it comes a sudden rush of vision. The chamber fills with air, the carvings painted in vibrant colours, deep blues, golds and reds that gleam under torchlight. People stand here in a wide circle, their faces solemn. In the centre, an old man speaks, his voice low but steady, the language foreign, yet rhythmic. Behind him, a large cloth hangs, embroidered with the same symbols that cover the walls. The people are not just listening, they are remembering. Each time the man gestures to a symbol, they echo his words in unison, their voices weaving together until the sound is like the tide, rolling and returning. This is not a lesson in the way of reading or writing. This is a ceremony of memory, a way of carrying knowledge without ever setting it down on a tablet or scroll. The vision fades and the water returns, but the feeling remains, the certainty that this chamber was a vault, not for objects, but for stories too valuable to risk losing to flood or fire. Here, in these walls, the city kept its memory alive in the mind of its people. You leave the chamber and follow a narrow passage that branches from its far side. It curves gently downward until it opens into a cavern-like hall. The floor is covered in large slabs, each engraved with a different pattern. Some are geometric, others resemble maps, and a few depict constellations. The arrangement of the slabs is deliberate. Walking between them feels like following a path through the city's greatest ideas. You pause at one that shows the curve of a coastline unlike any you recognize, dotted with small islands. Arcs connect the islands to points inland, and near each point is one of the symbols you've been finding across Heracleion. You realize this is more than a map. It's a diagram of the city's connections to other places, a web stretching far beyond Egypt's shores. The official history never spoke of this. To the world above, Heracleion was a singular marvel, a port city lost to time. But here, in the quiet beneath, the waves, you can see that it was part of something much larger, a constellation of knowledge centers, each keeping part of the whole. Moving deeper into the hall, you find a slab unlike the others. It is smooth, with no visible carvings, but when you lay your hand on it, a vision blooms behind your eyes. You're standing on a high platform in another place entirely, stone towers rising around you, the air heavy with the scent of the sea. You see faces you don't know, wearing clothing unlike anything you've seen here. And yet, in their eyes, you recognize the same quiet knowing you've seen in the visions of Heracleon's people. It's gone in a heartbeat, leaving you in the hall with only the soundless water for company. You linger for a moment, wondering how far the reach of this network went, how many other cities were erased, and how many still sleep waiting to be found. You leave the hall and follow another corridor that rises gently toward the surface. Along the way, you pass smaller rooms, each containing fragments of statues, shards of decorated pottery, and the occasional intact artifact. These are not displayed as they would be in a temple or market. They are stored, as though waiting to be moved or hidden. It strikes you that much of this city's knowledge may have been prepared for departure before the end came. Finally, you emerge into open water. The streets above seem brighter after the dim depths. You pass the familiar landmarks, the observation circle, the statue with open palms, the teaching courtyard, and they feel different now, more like pieces of a vast, deliberate design. You find yourself drawn toward the edge of the city, where the ruins give way to the bare seabed. There, half buried in the sand, lies a massive stone ring. It is cracked in several places, but its shape is unmistakable. Inside its circumference, the sand has been swept clear by the currents, revealing a perfect spiral carved into the stone. You float above it, following the spiral inward with your eyes. It narrows to a single point at the center, no larger than a coin. You imagine standing here when the city was alive, the spiral filled with light from the sun or torches, casting the shape outward in shadow. Perhaps it was a marker, perhaps a signal, perhaps a way of measuring something invisible. The hum is strong here, the kind that seems to align with your own pulse. You close your eyes and let it carry you, and in the darkness, you feel the shape of the spiral not just beneath you, but within you. An endless curve folding in on itself, yet always moving forward. It is the city's story and perhaps your own. A return, a remembering, a continuation. When you open your eyes, the spiral is still there, but the light has shifted. The currents are changing, and you know your time here tonight is nearly over. You rise slowly, letting the spiral fall away beneath you, the city spreading out once more in the water below. From up here it looks almost whole. You can see the lines that connect its parts, the points where they meet, the subtle geometry that ties it all together. It feels less like a ruin and more like a sleeping mind, still holding its thoughts close. As you break the surface, the question comes again, not as doubt, but as wonder. If this is what one city holds, how much more waits in the others we have yet to find? The night is still, the sea stretching out above you like a velvet canopy. You let yourself sink again into Heracleion's quiet embrace, the water closing over you with the slow certainty of a closing door. The hum greets you instantly now, as though the city no longer needs to search for you. It simply knows where you are and why you've come. It is softer tonight, less a summons and more an acknowledgement, like the nod of someone who's been waiting for you to return to the conversation. The current guides you toward the southern edge of the ruins, where the streets fade into scattered stones and sandbanks. Here the water feels warmer, stirred by faint vents from the earth below. You pass over a ridge and see it, half hidden beneath a mound of silt, a structure unlike any you've yet encountered. It is a dome, collapsed in places, but still holding most of its shape. Wide cracks in its surface reveal glimpses of the interior, and as you circle it, you find a narrow opening just large enough to slip through. Inside, the dome's inner walls are lined with carvings, but these are different from the spirals and arcs you've seen elsewhere. Here, the shapes are layered, circles within circles, grids overlaid on star patterns. wave lines intersecting with geometric forms. The designs seem almost alive under the shifting light, changing slightly as you move. At the center of the chamber lies a circular pool, its edges lined with black stone polished to a mirror sheen. The water in the pool is perfectly still, unaffected by the currents outside. You lean over it, and the reflection is so clear that for a moment you mistake it for an opening into the air above. But then the surface shifts, and you see not your own face, but the city whole, and lit by the sun, its walls standing tall, its streets alive with people. You watch as the image changes, the sun sinks, the sky deepens to indigo, and stars appear overhead. The city remains, but the people move differently now, gathering in certain plazas, lighting fires at specific points. You see the statue with open palms, the observation circle, the teaching courtyard, all illuminated in perfect alignment with the stars. The image pulses faintly, as if drawing your attention to the connections between them. The vision shifts again, and now the city is seen from far above, the coastline curving away, the river branching inland. Beyond the city, other points of light appear, faint at first, then brighter. You realize these are not stars, but other places, other cities perhaps, each connected to Heracleion by faint lines that cross the land and sea. You blink, and the pool is just a pool again, dark and still. But the memory of what you've seen lingers, a clear map etched into your mind. You know now that Heracleion was not just a hub, it was one of many, each part of a network designed not merely for trade, but for something deeper. The movement of knowledge across time and space. You leave the pool and trace the carvings on the wall. In several places you find small, deliberate breaks in the patterns, as if pieces of the design were removed. You imagine the hands that carved them, and later the hands that erased parts of them, removing only enough to make the full meaning unreadable to anyone who did not already know it. The hum grows stronger as you circle the dome, leading you to a section where the carvings give way to a single large panel. This panel is covered not with symbols, but with figures, people standing in a line, each holding something: a scroll, a vessel, a tablet, a small stone. Their faces are calm, almost expressionless, but their eyes are all turned toward the same point beyond the edge of the carving. You can't see what they're looking at, but you feel the pull of it, as if it lies somewhere not far from here. When you step back, you realize something else. The way the figures are arranged mirrors the path you've taken through the city in your explorations. Each object they hold corresponds to a place you've seen: the tablet from the teaching courtyard, the vessel from the open-palmed statue, the stone from the spiral ring. It is as though the carving itself is a map of the city's memory, laid out in human form. You move toward the opening again, feeling the hum ease as you leave the dome. Outside, the currents shift, drawing you toward a low ridge of rock at the very edge of the ruins. Here, half buried in the sand, lies a massive stone slab cracked down the middle. The surface is worn, but you can still see faint grooves forming a starburst pattern. At the center of the burst is a small depression, as if something once rested there: a stone, a metal disc, perhaps even an artifact small enough to be carried away. You place your hand in the hollow, and the hum sharpens into a steady single tone. For a moment the sea disappears. You're standing on the ridge in bright sunlight, the slab whole and gleaming, the object at its center glowing like captured starlight. Around you stand men and women in robes, their eyes fixed on the object. No one speaks. The air feels charged, heavy with something about to be set in motion. And then it's gone. The slab is cracked again, the hollow empty, the water cool around your hand. Whatever was once here is gone, and has been gone for a long time. You drift back toward the city, your thoughts circling around the vision of the pool, the map of connected cities, the missing pieces of the carvings. The official history speaks of Heracleion as an isolated marvel, remarkable in its own right, but ultimately a casualty of nature. But here, in the quiet truth beneath the waves, it is clear that the city's greatest importance lay in what it was connected to, and in what it carried for others. You find yourself wondering, if the other points of light you saw still exist, are they also hidden? Are they sleeping beneath other seas, waiting for someone to listen? Or do they still stand in the open air, their connections invisible because no one remembers how to see them? The hum settles into a low, steady rhythm, like the beat of a drum heard from far away. You know it is time to leave for tonight, but as you rise toward the surface, you keep your eyes on the lines of the city below, tracing its patterns once more. It no longer looks like a ruin to you. Not entirely. It looks like a fragment of something still alive, a single voice in a chorus that has yet to be heard again. And in the quiet between heartbeats, the question forms with perfect clarity. If one voice has survived the water, how many others might still be speaking? If only we could hear them. The sea is calm tonight, almost unnaturally so. You drift down into its stillness, feeling the weight of water press softly against you, wrapping you in its cool embrace. The hum greets you before the first shapes of the city emerge, a low, constant note that seems to hum through your ribs, steady and familiar, like the pulse of something vast and patient. It has been with you every step of this journey, guiding you through streets and plazas, into hidden chambers and long-forgotten halls. Tonight it feels different, not weaker, not stronger, just final. Heracleion rises beneath you in the dim light, and for a moment it feels as though you are returning to a friend. You can see the places you've walked before, the observation circle with its pillars, the statue with open palms, the spiral ring at the edge of the ruins. They are scattered like pieces of a puzzle you have slowly been fitting together, each one whispering its part of the city's story. The current leads you to the heart of the city, the grand plaza where the platform stands silent and bare. You hover there, remembering the vision of the obelisk glinting in the sun, the lines of shadow stretching like the hands of a clock. You can almost feel the heat of the day, hear the murmur of the crowd, sense the rhythm of a life long gone but never fully extinguished. The hum swells, and you turn toward a street you've never taken. It leads you through a row of narrow arches, their stones softened by centuries of silt and tide. Beyond them lies a low, wide building half buried in sand. You step inside and find a long hall lined with shelves, most empty, but here and there a shard of pottery or fragment of carved stone remains, as if someone left in a hurry and could not take everything with them. At the far end of the hall is a raised dais, and on it a single stone chest. Its lid is cracked, but still in place. You rest your hand on it, and the hum deepens until the water seems to vibrate around you. The vision comes swiftly this time. You see the hall as it once was, shelves filled with scrolls and tablets, the air thick with the scent of oil lamps and old parchment. A group of men and women stand around the chest, their faces lit by a single flame. One of them speaks, and though you cannot understand the words, you feel the weight of their meaning. This is the last gathering. They lift the lid, place something inside a bundle wrapped in dark cloth and seal it. Then they stand together for a moment, heads bowed, before scattering into the shadows. The vision fades, and you are back in the quiet hall. The chest is still there, the lid still cracked, but what was inside is long gone. And yet, not entirely gone. You feel it in the hum, as though the knowledge once kept here still moves through the city in ways you can't quite touch. You leave the hall and return to the open streets. The city feels brighter now, even in its ruin. The patterns you've followed, the spirals, the arcs, the alignments, have woven themselves together into something whole in your mind. You see it clearly. Heracleion was never just a city. It was a node in a vast web, each point connected by lines of trade. Yes, but also by shared knowledge, shared purpose. It was a keeper of something older than any single empire, something its people believed was worth protecting, even if it meant letting the city itself disappear from history. You drift toward the edge of the ruins, where the seabed slopes away into deeper water. Here, the current picks up, curling around you like a hand at your back. The hum follows, steady and low, until you reach the spiral ring one last time. You hover above it, watching the way the sand settles into its grooves, the way the spiral seems to draw your gaze inward, and then you close your eyes. You hear the hum not in your ears, but in your chest. It carries everything you've seen, the statues, the mosaics, the carvings, the visions of people long gone. You realize that this is what the city has been doing all along, passing its memory to you not in words alone, but in the shape of its streets, the tilt of its stones, the rhythm of its silence. When you open your eyes again, the spiral is still beneath you, patient and unbroken. You know the city will remain here, waiting for whoever comes next, ready to tell its story again in whatever fragments survive. You let the current lift you upward, the ruins fading into the blue below, the hum softening until it is no more than the echo of your own heartbeat. You break the surface and draw a slow breath. The air feels different now, lighter, but full of questions that stretch far beyond the horizon. How many other cities like this sleep beneath the water? How many stories have been hidden, not by accident but by design? And how much of our own history is shaped by what we have not been allowed to see? That is the gift Heracleion leaves you with, not an answer, but a question. And in that question, the quiet reminder that there is always more to find if you are willing to look beyond the surface. So as you sit with the stillness of the night, I want you to hold on to that thought. Let it follow you into your dreams as the hum has followed you through these streets. And if the journey has moved you, if the city's whispers have found a place in your mind, then help keep its memory alive. Share this story with someone who wonders about the past. Leave a comment with your thoughts, your questions, or even where in the world you're listening from tonight. And if you want to hear more journeys like this, into places long hidden and voices long silent, subscribe so you'll be here for the next descent. Because somewhere, even now, the silence is still speaking. It is